Welcome to this Dark Souls Special Edition Deep Dive, brought to you by The Haunted Podcast with hosts Gary and Emily. Make sure to check out their podcast and please like and subscribe.
Absolutely. It is a great show.
Yeah, it really is. So today we are welcoming you, the listener, into our little historical circle here, as a fellow scholar.
Right, because we are diving into a really heavy, really complex historical figure today.
We really are. We are looking at the historical rise, the architectural marvels, and, well, the terrifying descent into madness of Seath the Scaleless.
Which is just a wild trajectory to study.
It is. I mean, imagine being a god, right? You win the most cataclysmic war in all of recorded history.
Yeah.
You have this boundless, infinite knowledge. You've conquered death. So, why are you hiding in a library?
Jumping at shadows.
Exactly. Jumping at shadows, locking yourself away while these weeping, tentacled abominations patrol your basement.
It's a complete paradox. The historical record often tries to just, neatly categorize the figures from the early age of fire.
Right, like the valiant lord or the chaotic witch.
Exactly. Or the stoic knight. But Seath defies all of that elementary classification.
He really does.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to look at his life not as some mythological fairy tale, but as an actual rigorous study of geopolitical betrayal.
And scientific obsession?
Yes, and biological horror. Because, we all know the foundational history, right? We know Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, hurled the lightning that brought down the everlasting dragons.
We know the Age of Ancients ended in fire and blood.
Right, but the logistics of that victory, the actual military intelligence that made it possible, that is where this whole story actually begins.
It really is, because we have to understand that the supremacy of the everlasting dragons was absolute. It was a biological reality.
Yeah, those stone scales weren't just armor, were they?
No, not at all. They were the actual physiological mechanism of their immortality. They existed completely outside the cycle of degradation.
Wow. So, no cellular decay at all?
None. The scales made them entirely immune to the passage of time or any physical trauma. It was a society with zero disparity.
No life, no death. Just a static, unending existence.
Right. And into that static, perfect world, Seath is born.
Which is just a monumental biological anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
The historical texts literally refer to him as a mutant.
Yeah, a white dragon born entirely without those stone scales.
Which, we really have to consider the existential terror of his daily life back then.
Oh, it must have been unbearable.
He is the only being in his entire civilization who can bleed. The only one whose cells will actually degrade over time.
He was immortal, surrounded by eternal beings. Beings who, frankly, fundamentally lack the capacity to even comprehend mortality.
They didn't even understand what he was going through.
Exactly. The archival fragments we have suggest his peers viewed him with this chilling, detached curiosity.
Wow, just treating him like a biological flaw.
Right, a flaw in a flawless world. And that kind of profound marginalization, it breeds a very unique type of survival instinct.
It breeds an intellect sharpened by just constant, low-level panic, which honestly casts his role in the Dragon War in a totally different light for me.
How so?
Well, the traditional historical narrative loves to paint Seath as this, this simple villain, the ultimate traitor.
The backstabber who sold out his own species.
Exactly. But looking at the geopolitics of his defection, I struggle to use the word treason.
Because he was never really one of them.
Right. How can you commit treason against a society that never afforded you citizenship in the first place? He leveraged the only asset he had for asylum.
His intellect and his inside knowledge of dragon anatomy.
Yeah, historically we see defectors exchange state secrets for power all the time.
And Seath provided the new lords with the exact vector of attack they needed to break the stalemate.
Because he understood the molecular structure of the scales, right?
He did. He knew they were non-conductive to thermal energy, so fire wouldn't work. But they were highly susceptible to concentrated, high-voltage atmospheric discharges.
Meaning lightning. He told Gwyn to use lightning.
Exactly. And the lightning didn't actually kill the dragons. It acted as a peeling agent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it disrupted the binding force of the scales, exposing the vulnerable flesh underneath.
And once that flesh was exposed, they were mortal, just like him.
Just like him. It was a calculated exchange. But Seath negotiated a historically unprecedented compensation package for that intelligence.
Yeah, he wasn't just given a safe place to hide. He was integrated into the very highest echelons of the new ruling class.
He is named a duke. He is gifted a massive, sprawling tract of land.
And most incredibly, he is given a fragment of a lord's soul.
Which is wild. Gwyn effectively handed a piece of ultimate divine authority to someone they saw as a biological anomaly.
But, none of that political capital actually solved his core problem.
Right. Power doesn't cure mortality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A Lord's soul fragment doesn't give you the stone scales you lack. But he did eventually find a cure, didn't he?
He did, through a highly contested artifact he took during the sacking of his former civilization, the primordial crystal.
Okay, let's talk about this crystal. Because biologically and historically, it is fascinating.
It wasn't just a magical battery. It functioned as a localized reality-altering anchor.
Right.
As long as that crystal remained structurally intact, it forced Seath's biological form to constantly revert to a pristine state.
So it's basically an externalized cellular regeneration engine.
Exactly. Any physical trauma he sustained would instantly close up and heal.
He achieved true immortality, but it was entirely artificial.
Yes. He had to outsource his very survival to a geological formation.
Which, the psychological fallout of that dependency has to be massive.
You cannot overstate it. He spends centuries terrified of death, completely vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then he finally gets invulnerability, but the mechanism for it can be shattered with a heavy enough hammer.
So the anxiety doesn't go away. It just transfers from his own skin to this rock.
He trades one vulnerability for another.
Which completely explains the architecture of his magnum opus, the Duke's Archives.
Oh, absolutely. If your life is tethered to a fragile object, you build a fortress.
Right, but when you study the floor plans of the archives, it's not just a fortress. The design is deeply, heavily antagonistic.
It actively resists being navigated.
Yes. You have these soaring vertical spaces, massive wooden bookshelves everywhere, and these colossal rotating staircases.
I always look at the layout as a physical manifestation of a disassociated connection puzzle.
Like those old point-and-click adventure logic puzzles.
Yeah, exactly. You find a locked iron gate on the western wing, but the mechanical lever to open it is 3 floors up on the eastern wing.
And the only way across is to manually rotate a massive central staircase just to bridge the gap.
It forces anyone inside to master this convoluted, maddening rule set just to walk from room to room.
It's an architecture born of sheer paranoia. He wants to dictate the logistical flow of every single entity in his house.
But there's a massive logistical paradox here that historians always grapple with.
The blindness.
Yes. Seath is entirely blind. His mutation wasn't just limited to his scales. His visual cortex never developed.
Which is wild to think about. How does a blind, paranoid entity oversee a labyrinthine fortress?
And manage a staff of scholars and conduct delicate alchemy.
Right. How is he doing this when he can't even read the books he's hoarding?
Well, he engineers a solution. And he does it through his most loyal retainers, the six-eyed channelers.
Okay, let's get into the channelers. They were heavily steeped in sorcery, but their defining historical feature is that headwear.
Right, the tall metallic helms, adorned with 6 distinct eye holes, arranged in 2 vertical columns.
I always have to look at biological analogies here. Rather than viewing the channelers as just magic guards, it makes more sense to view them as an external nervous system.
Like an octopus.
Exactly like an octopus. The central brain makes the macro decisions, but the arms have their own neural clusters. They gather data and feed it back.
The channelers were his optic nerves. The helms were actually magical conduits.
So the 6 eyes were explicitly constructed to compensate for his lack of sight.
Yes. Historical artifacts confirm they gathered visual data and transmitted it directly to his consciousness.
That is incredible. And this decentralized network went way beyond the walls of the archives, too.
Oh, definitely. We have historical records of channelers operating in the undead parish, keeping an eye on the bell of awakening.
And we know they were deep underground in the depths as well.
Seath is physically locked in his library, terrified of leaving his crystal, but his nervous system is stretched across the entire continent of Lordran.
It is the ultimate expression of control, but it's totally born from vulnerability.
Absolutely. So he monitors the world, but his direct physical focus is on the texts inside his archive.
Right. He doesn't just build a library to hide. He earns the historical title of the grandfather of sorcery.
The volume of knowledge he accumulated there sparked a total renaissance in magical theory.
His early crystal alchemy was undeniably brilliant, like the creation of the moonlight butterfly.
A staggering breakthrough. He synthesized biological life from pure magical energy.
And the crystal ember. which fundamentally altered metallurgy for that era.
Right. It allowed weapons to hit with devastating force, but at the cost of extreme structural fragility.
Which is such a perfect metaphor for his entire operation, isn't it? Immense power, but fundamentally brittle.
That is a great way to put it. He scaled up that tech to build the crystal golems, too. These towering, autonomous military assets.
He was basically rewriting the laws of physics.
Sure.
But then the progress kind of stagnates, doesn't it?
It does,
Yeah.
because the texts he is hoarding aren't just technical manuals.
Right. They are ancient, esoteric tomes about the chaotic nature of souls and reality.
And the environment of the archives just becomes intellectually toxic.
The knowledge itself acts as a corrosive agent on the mind.
We actually have a perfectly documented case study of this toxicity, the historical figure of Big Hat Logan.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Arguably the preeminent human sorcerer of his entire epoch.
He travels to the archives specifically to study Seath's collection.
And he had the intellect to comprehend the texts, right?
He did. But he lacked the biological resilience to withstand the psychological friction of that knowledge.
The accounts of Logan's decay are just chilling. He immerses himself in those study rooms, reading the exact same texts Seath is studying.
And his grip on reality just dissolves completely.
He starts stripping off his clothing, right?
Yes. He loses the ability to distinguish between himself and the magic he's studying.
And he eventually goes entirely hollow, lashing out violently in complete dissociation.
The environment literally broke the greatest human mind of the age.
That brings up a massive logistical question about the channelers.
Right.
If Seath is blind, he can't read the text that broke Logan.
The channelers have to physically read them to him.
They are acting as his dictation software.
Exactly.
The auditory horror of that scenario is staggering to me. Imagine these echoing stone halls.
Yeah.
And day in, day out, these servants are reading forbidden, mind-shattering lore out loud to a giant blind dragon.
They are processing the intellectual toxicity on his behalf.
And that shared pursuit of forbidden knowledge inevitably degraded them too.
The historical record shows they largely went hollow alongside their master. Their loyalty locked them into this cycle of reading texts that systematically destroyed their sanity.
The archives transitioned from this repository of knowledge into an active, lethal hazard.
But theoretical magic isn't enough for Seath. Golems and butterflies don't give him the answers he really wants.
Right. He wants to understand the absolute mechanics of biology and mutation.
He needs subjects that aren't made of crystal. He needs flesh and blood.
Which is when this architectural marvel pivots into a site of historical atrocity.
The lower levels of the archives, specifically that fortified tower stretching down toward the bedrock.
It gets converted into a massive prison and a vivisection laboratory.
And the channelers, their role gets repurposed entirely. They aren't just surveillance nodes anymore.
No, the historical texts begin referring to them as snatchers.
Operating way beyond the borders of Lordran, they use their sorcery to paralyze and abduct human targets.
Dragging them back to the prison tower for Seath's alchemical trials, which results in the entities historically documented as the writhing mistakes.
The Pisacas.
Yes. And looking at the biological structure of Pisacas is just a masterclass in extreme forced evolutionary splicing.
It is a chaotic fusion of discrete biological concepts.
Let's break that down, because it's terrifying. The lower half of the entity is stripped of its bipedal structure, right?
Right. Replaced by the heavy, muscular body of a serpent. It gave them rapid, slithering mobility across the stone floors.
But the upper torso retains this horrifying semblance of a human posture.
But the head and neck are entirely replaced by a writhing mass of blue, gelatinous octopus tentacles.
And concealed inside that mass of tentacles is a rigid biological spike they use for impaling.
The physical description alone points to severe tampering, but the forensic evidence confirming their origin is undeniable.
It's the humanity, right?
Yes. When a Pisacas is slain, the physical remains often yield a sprite of humanity.
Which is the smoking gun. Humanity as a physical resource is totally exclusive to the human race in this historical era.
You do not extract humanity from a natural-born beast or a demon.
The presence of that sprite confirms that beneath all those scales and tentacles, these entities were human beings.
Their genetic code was violently rewritten by crystal alchemy.
And Seath's own biological deficits heavily influenced how these mutations turned out.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because he didn't understand visual processing, he didn't prioritize visual acuity in his creations.
So the Pisacas suffered from severe visual impairment.
Yes. Early adventure logs note that you could stand relatively close to a Pisaca without triggering an attack as long as you were motionless and silent.
Because their auditory processing was radically overcompensated.
They developed a hyper-evolved sensory adaptation. Biological sonar.
They navigated those dark, winding corridors entirely via echolocation.
And Seath engineered a system to weaponize that exact sensory adaptation.
A prison alarm system?
Exactly. At the top of the prison tower, guarded by serpent men, there is this heavy mechanical lever.
And pulling it triggers a massive physical alarm. The acoustics of the tower are so crucial here because it's a spiral stone shaft.
Right, so the shrill mechanical blare of the alarm echoes downward, amplifying as it reaches the holding cells at the base.
And you would think an alarm like that would scare them, but they don't scatter.
No. The specific frequency of that siren triggers an instantaneous coordinated frenzy.
It's like modern acoustic harassment devices, the ones used in maritime security or riot control to cause sensory overload.
But Seath inverted the purpose. The alarm wasn't a deterrent.
It was a specifically calibrated trigger designed to interface with their sonar.
It overrode their passive state and herded them into a violent swarm.
They were perfectly capable of locating any moving target in the tower through the noise. He built a biological weapon and then designed the exact acoustic environment needed to deploy it.
It's a terrifying display of his scientific acumen. But honestly, the mechanics of the sonar often distract from the most devastating historical revelation about the Pisacas.
The demographic of the victims.
Right. To really understand the depth of his hubris, we have to look at two specific entities documented in the furthest corner of the holding cell.
Unlike the frenzied swarm that rushes the stairs when the alarm goes off, these two display completely divergent behavior.
They are docile. If a historian or an adventurer approaches them, they actively recoil.
They slither into the corner, just trying to make themselves as small as possible. The audio logs from these encounters are so harrowing.
They don't emit guttural hisses, they weep.
And the vocal cords producing that sound were completely untouched by the mutation. It is the distinct, unmistakable sound of human women crying.
The critical historical artifacts linking these two entities to their past lives are the miracles they carry.
When they are finally granted mercy, they yield the miracles soothing sunlight and bountiful sunlight.
Which is huge. The historical texts are incredibly rigid about who gets those miracles.
They explicitly state it's a special miracle granted to the maidens of Guinevere, Princess of the Sun.
The geopolitical implications are staggering. Guinevere is the daughter of Gwyn.
The very sovereign who gave Seath his title and power.
Yes. The cleric maidens of Guinevere weren't just random citizens.
No, they were the highest-ranking religious figures in the culture, the spiritual healers of the god's own inner circle.
Seath wasn't just conducting unregulated research on the marginalized. His paranoia and hubris had grown so massive that he was abducting the political and religious elite of his own allies.
Mutating the maidens of the royal family in his basement. And he felt entirely untouchable doing it.
The sheer audacity of the crime is hard to process.
It really is. And it makes you look at how history and folklore attempt to process trauma on that scale, like the etymology surrounding the Pisacas.
It's a prime example of historical sanitation. If you look at the earliest regional texts, before the translation of Pisaca became standard, they were called Scylla.
And that connection to Greek folklore is incredibly revealing. Scylla was a beautiful nymph, right?
Right. She was the victim of a jealous curse that deformed her lower half into tentacles and monstrous appendages.
The parallel is exact. The myth is all about beauty corrupted and deformed against its will.
But the later term, Pisacca, draws from ancient Hindu theology,
where Pisacas are flesh-eating demons.
Born of dark magic and anger, categorized by protruding veins and unnatural eyes.
So by shifting the name from Scylla, which implies a tragic victim, to Pisaca, implying a demonic aggressor, the historical record is actively masking the atrocity.
Exactly. If an adventurer says they slaughtered a horde of flesh-eating demons, they are a hero. The violence is justified.
But if the text accurately stated that the adventurer slaughtered a room full of kidnapped, mutated cleric maidens, the heroism evaporates entirely.
It becomes a profound tragedy. The language of history categorized them as monsters to distance the observer from the uncomfortable reality of Seath's crimes.
So we have this environment saturated with madness-inducing texts. We have an acoustic alarm system weaponizing chimeras.
and a paranoid architect alienating his only allies.
How did the historical adventurers of this era ever actually dismantle this operation?
Well, the documentation of the initial infiltration shows a brutal truth. The first encounter with Seath was a mathematical guaranteed failure.
The texts literally call it an unjust death sentence.
Because when an adventurer breaches the upper archives and confronts the Duke, Seath is ready. He's a tactician.
He knows his weakness. The primordial crystal isn't in his study.
No, it was geographically isolated deep within the crystal caves, requiring a treacherous descent through the inner garden.
So the adventurer steps into the upper chamber to face an entity immune to physical laws.
You can cleave his flesh with the heaviest weaponry, and the wounds instantly knit themselves back together.
He cannot be killed in that room. Defeat is an absolute certainty.
But the defining characteristic of the seasoned adventurers of that epoch is their capacity to adapt the metaphysical laws of their environment.
Right. The survival tactic for this execution relied on a specialized artifact, the Ring of Sacrifice.
The mechanics of this ring are fascinating. Usually, suffering a mortal blow strips your accumulated souls and humanity from you.
A catastrophic loss of resources.
But the Ring of Sacrifice intercepts that penalty. Upon death, the ring shatters.
The physical body still undergoes death and relocation, but the essence and humanity of the wearer are completely preserved. The sheer nerve required to execute that strategy is incredible. You have to willingly walk into a mad god's chamber wearing this ring knowing you will be slaughtered.
Just to trigger the next logistical phase? Because Seath didn't discard bodies, he collected them.
Right. When an intruder struck down, the serpent men dragged the corpse down into the prison tower.
Setting the stage for one of the most rigorously documented prison breaks in history.
The adventurer revives, locked behind heavy iron bars. They have their faculties, but they are trapped at the bottom of the archives.
The immediate obstacle is the serpent guard outside the cell. You have to neutralize the guard through the bars just to get the key.
And the moment you turn that key and step out, the trap springs.
The serpent men at the top pull the lever. The siren activates.
The sensory overload crashes down the spiral staircase, and the Pisacas are instantly triggered into their acoustic frenzy.
The psychological pressure of this sequence is engineered for maximum trauma.
You just experienced a mortal blow, you wake up in a cage, an alarm is shredding your ears, and mutated clerics are coming to tear you apart.
Seath wasn't just trying to kill intruders. As undead, they would just revive and try again.
He was trying to induce hollowing.
Exactly. Hollowing is the ultimate defeat. It is psychological collapse.
The moment an undead loses their will and surrenders to madness.
Seath engineered an environment to break their minds before they could ever find the crystal caves.
He wanted them to join the mad channelers and broken scholars. But the greatest adventurers refused to break.
They fought their way up the stairs, silenced the alarm,
mapped the disassociated puzzle of the staircases, pushed through the toxic library, and descended into the crystal caves.
Where they located the primordial crystal, and with a single strike, shattered the anchor of Seath's immortality,
rendering the grandfather of sorcery completely, terrifyingly mortal once again.
The ensuing battle was the culmination of centuries of tension, but it was finally bound by the laws of physics. Seath fell.
The historical arc of his life is one of the most profound tragedies we can study.
From a deeply vulnerable outcast, shivering in a society of stone immortals,
utilizing his genius to achieve absolute political power and the immortality denied to him at birth.
But the pursuit mutated his mind as severely as he mutated the flesh of his victims.
He became a tyrant. The blood of the royal clerics, the hollowed minds of the channelers, the shattered sanity of Logan.
They are the mortar holding the stones of the archives together.
It really forces a reckoning with the concept of progress. The foundational texts of modern sorcery were subsidized by unregulated cruelty.
Which leaves historians grappling with a central question regarding the prize he sacrificed everything for.
We take it as fact that the crystal granted him immortality. It healed his wounds.
But Seath was a creature of flesh. His cells were not meant to be frozen in geological time.
You're suggesting the crystal wasn't sustaining his life, but violently rewriting it.
Did it grant true, peaceful immortality? Or did it constantly clash with his mortal biology?
So his madness wasn't just from reading toxic texts, it was a physical symptom.
His body constantly rejecting, tearing, and aggressively regenerating around the alien influence of the crystal.
He traded the fear of a natural death for an eternity of agonizing artificial life.
Forced to endure the feeling of his cells dying and violently resurrecting every single second.
That is a chilling realization to close on. Thank you all for joining us on this historical journey through the architecture of paranoia.
Keep looking past the folklore, everyone.
Absolutely. And always question the mechanisms of the history you were told. Until next time, keep diving deep.